The main program I used in production was Final Cut Express 4.0. Using this, I could initially create what I called the framework of my film before embellishing it. The framework consisted just of the interview footage in a chronological account of the narrative. I was able to construct this by using the timeline feature, and then when it came to fleshing it out by adding reenactment clips, I could just cut using the scissor tool and replace a section of interview visual with reenactment visual. This created a sort of voice-over narration effect. This is a massive improvement for my AS opening sequence production, for which I just recorded the voiceover using the Final Cut voiceover feature. Using audio from film footage produces better sound quality for voiceovers. In Final Cut Express, I could separate the audio of a clip with the visual by looking on the timeline. I had to be careful that when the audio did eventually rejoin the visual, that they were in sync. For example, I had to match the mouth movements with what was being heard at the time. Also, on Final Cut, I was able to create the sequence at the start where Jessica is actually becoming possessed, and also in the middle where the exorcism begins. I wanted these to be heavily edited and slightly surreal. With the part where Jessica becomes possessed, I lowered the exposure using the darkening filter to make the clip look more conventional of the horror genre. Then, with the exorcism sequence, I added reverb to the audio to create an alienation effect that made the Foley and diegetic sound more eerie. Then I added a fisheye filter over the visual to distort the clips and make the audience almost uncomfortable. I wanted them to feel in danger and slightly disorientated. The most important feature I used was cross dissolve. This, I had noticed, is used conventionally in documentaries with high tension to break the suspense into episode-like sections. I used it especially after lines of high drama like "I didn't know who else to turn to" and "What other choice did we have?" It places emphasis and gave the audience a slight respite from the quickly progressing narrative. The second program I used for producing my film was GarageBand. I created the score for the narrative using a continuous piano loop. I found a loop in a set of 8 and alternated between each one. The set of loops was all in the same key, and so it didn't sound disjointed when I added them together. There was a lot of debate over my music, but the majority of my audience understood and liked the fact that it didn't scare you. It just added to the drama and not the horror. I added a sound effects called Scary from a website called soundbible.com and placed it over the top of the piano loop on a separate track I had created. This ensured that my movie did sit solidly within the genre of horror without losing conventions of documentaries. I think if I'd have followed traditional horror movie Foley, it would have ruined the balance of the hybrid, making it far too like a pure horror movie. For the titles of my interviews, I used a program called LiveType, which allowed me to overlay the titles onto the footage of Final Cut. I copied the font used in Paranormal Activity to make it obvious that this was my inspiration. I then added another layer onto the LiveType timeline and placed an effect called Shadow Flight, which made each letter pulse, in turn reminding me of the titles of Most Haunted, the original inspiration for my entire film. For my ancillary tasks, I used Photoshop. This was my first time properly using Photoshop, and it let me create lots of different layers on my poster, so I could not only add my film title, but also review quotes that linked the two texts together. For my bidding card, I was able to download the font Movie Tool from the website DaFont, and using that on Photoshop, I was able to create a conventional feature on my poster. Photoshop also helped me divide my text, which I'd written primarily on Microsoft Word, into 4 columns conventional of Empire reviews. For my research and feedback stages, I used iMovie to record the focus groups and also edited them on the program too. iMovie was good for simple editing, whereas Final Cut Express has more features and an extensive list of filters and transitions.